So, Travels with Epicurus by Daniel Klein, a little known kind of author. Probably known for the no good reason sufficient why he shouldn't be better known, but I think and this is my surface level analysis of his career. I think has a degree in philosophy, like a 4-year degree. I'm not sure if it's a bachelor's of arts. And I believe he taught philosophy, but then he kind of went into kind of traveling around, went around the world, and visited all kinds of places, none less than Greece and all the different kind of archipelago, the wide, vast array of islands off the coast of Greece. And so we have a pretty interesting kind of Pickwin kind of trajectory of different things that he talks about, and he kind of in similar with Hiking with Nietzsche, which I'd like to review. I read that probably about 5 or 6 years ago. Really liked it. And yeah, it didn't come out too long ago, too. That's another kind of new book, but this one is a 2012 one, I think. But John Cagg does a similar thing where he's talking about hiking the same spots in Salisbury of Switzerland on the cusp of Germany, where Friedrich Nietzsche, obviously needs no introduction, famously spent a part of his life, and that's kind of where the most formative, kind of most vastly profound ideas that he came up with, like the eternal return. I'm sorry, I can't speak today. But yeah, so in a similar way, of where he kind of like talks about his real life experiences in bringing his family back there, and how it kind of seemed to him a little bit more disastrous than he was when he was in his early youth, and kind of on a kind of leave to given some like $1,000 by his college. I'm a bit rusty on what happens in the book, but then he goes with his wife and his son, and his experiences are drastically different because it's 20 years later. So he's talking about kind of all that, and then he instills a lot of Nietzsche's thought in not only that, but also talks about different thinkers like Hermann Hesse. I think the members of the critical theory school, which is like Horkheimer and blanking on the other words, but you know, some of the members of different kind of German throughout history, and like how Nietzsche had such a impactful effect on them. And but with this, it's more so in the specific little spectacle area of Hydra, of, you know, the head of Hydra. That's kind of where I think the namesake is in Greek mythology, and how where the author Daniel Klein kind of starts off talking about Epicurus, and how he also got a bad rap for later on people kind of a lot of Christians, I think, like maybe Christian Neoplatonists, these kind of people that were very kind of body denying of the body, very much of the eternal forms and the perfect kind of forms, were very kind of critical of Epicureanism because of how hedonistic they thought. They thought it was hedonism, which is not the same. Epicureanism was more so just treating living in such a way that was healthy in body and mind, doing away with excess kind of thing. So it's like an enjoyment of good food and good wine, and how the author makes clear at some point that the diet of Epicurus was something of the effect of like some kind of not rye bread, but it was some kind of like grainy kind of bread or something like that. It was something that it wasn't like a kind of meaty kind of lamb roast. He rarely ate meat, I think, but it was more like this grainy kind of thing of, it was almost like the equivalent of like maybe like kind of a like the not even kind of the classic kind of olives and stuff like that, but kind of just a bread, kind of a soupy kind of thing, consistency that I think in maybe some kind of soup, I'm not sure, but whatever it wasn't like a glamorous kind of very, you know, it was more so just something that it was available to him at the same time every day that he could get used to, and he could do more important things like thinking or walking in his garden, which he'd like to do a lot. And yes, you see a similar kind of thing with whether it's the Greek cynics of Diogenes tradition, who are, you know, or the Socratic kind of dialogue between two people. It's like a lot of it starts in kind of especially in like Plato's Symposium, like a lot of this starts with like walking and like just kind of walking and just engaging with friends, and like friends and new friends will show up with his Socratic thing talking about justice and like what is justice, and like another person will show up, a friend of Socrates, and then a brother of a friend of Socrates, and then Glaucon or whoever that was, and a playwright, and different people. Like I think Aristophanes shows up at some point. I'm not too good on the names, the Greek names, but you have this tradition, and then there's different people like Pythagoras, I think. But yeah, so basically, yeah, Daniel Stein talks about his experiences and how, so basically, he clarifies Epicurus was more about abstaining from it, if anything, abstaining. Like he was talking about how alcohol, for example, wine is good, but not in excess. It's nothing in excess, and that's, I believe, isn't that the original inscription on the Oracle of Delphi? I think it's like, nothing in excess. I think the first part of it, I'm blanking on it, but it was dare to knowledge, I think, dare to know, and nothing in excess. There are two kind of points to it, but that mentality is kind of carried on into kind of a Greek kind of, there's a very Grecian kind of aspect that is, that he talks about in a parable that, like, I think it comes from ancient times as well, where somebody is an American kind of visits Greece, and then sees this man, the Greek man, naturalized guy, just sitting under his tree, eating a bowl of whatever. He's just like sitting in a hammock just under a tree, and then he's like, "What are you doing here?" And he's like, "Don't you know that I'm gonna like butcher this big time?" But he's like, "What?" He asks the guy what he's doing, and then the guy's like saying, the Greek guy says that he's just enjoying himself eating a whatever. And like enjoying the scenery, and then like the guy says, "Don't you know that you could spend?" The Westerner says that, "Don't you know that you could spend that money, your time, making something and building to such and such, and working at a career or an office job, or using all that time, that excess kind of opportunities bestowed to you. You could do X, Y, and Z, and you could build this career." Ultimately, and then he's like, and then the Greek guy interrupts him, and he's like, "So I can sit under a tree and do the same thing I'm doing now." So it's like kind of it's a kind of a funny, humorous anecdote, because it's like it does kind of paint the picture of that Greek kind of like acceptance of like one's fate in amor fati, like, but not also challenging. It's not challenging and like trying to back against the strays. But you also see maybe a kind of Oedipus kind of, or Sophocles, or paint a picture of a different kind of way of fate, of like wrestling fate and trying to run from it, and then not serendipitously, but unwittingly, but like committing that same fate, like killing your father, but like your father, like killing a homeless man, and getting into a scuffle, finding out the homeless man is your father, and fulfilling, and then burying his mother, which is like the Oedipus classic fate that I'm sure everybody knows. But yeah, so that's an interesting kind of aspect, because I think with the Epicurean aspect, and then you have different kind of like Plato and then Socrates, and other people kind of would want to belittle his philosophy, but I think he had some really interesting stuff to offer. So Daniel Klein, I think I probably consciously called him Stein at certain points, but it is Daniel Klein. It's a really interesting book. It's like almost like a travel catalog at some points, and I'm not like super big on those, but I thought it was like an interesting kind of way he painted a picture of all these different thinkers, and how the giving birth to myth and all that, the tragedy and the comedic way of looking at it. And Epicurus had, his followers were very could be quite abstemious, but they also enjoyed like good food and good wine and entertainment, but it was also not in an excessive, superfluous. Like that's the biggest thing, is that it wasn't like, people were, because binging on it was like that as well, but it was just a very simple credence. It wasn't over, it wasn't like, it was more so embracing the present moment, and like paying heed to the good things in life without, also like drinking of those things like too superfluously and too richly, but being able to properly kind of attune yourself to those things, and like being Yeah, so sentence kind of that sentence kind of ended a bit kind of mundanely. Like I had something more there, but now I think I'm just gonna wrap this up. But yeah, that is Travels with Epicurus. Epicurus, a journey into a Greek island in search of the fulfilled life is the full title, and yeah, thank you, Roger.